Hi, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate 5 demo for the piece I call Nukks. Now, why do I call this Nukks? Because that's the name of my orc monk that I play on World of Warcraft. I did this piece at Sketchbomb about a month ago, and there were lots of themes, and I actually structured all the themes around stuff that I thought I was going to want to draw. Some people had also suggested them because I've been playing a ton of Death Stranding. A lot of people I know have been playing a ton of Death Stranding, and we were like, let's draw Death Stranding. So there were lots of themes that could be tied to that. And I had a lot of ideas that I still want to execute, so I'm not going to show them here, but boy did I fail at trying to get them all done at Sketchbomb. I realized they were just too ambitious. Sam just carries too much cargo and I wouldn't have time to paint all of that, so I had to regroup and change what I was doing. So Sketchbomb is only 3 hours long, and I wasted about an hour and a half trying to do other ideas. And what I ended up falling back on was one of the themes was, what are you playing? And of course I'm always playing World of Warcraft in some capacity. So I thought, hey, my orc monk is currently transmogged with no shirt and no shoulders, and he's basically just got like an eye patch, so let's do that. Oh, and he has no hair, he's bald. He's been bald since I made him, and I just thought, that'll be easy, let's do that. So you could argue that this is generic orc with an eye patch, or if you know my character, you could say, oh, that's Nukks. Not that anybody would do that, because I only play with my wife, so my wife would be the only person who'd be like, oh, that's Nukks. And even then she'd probably be like, there's not enough telling me this is your character, stop being so lazy and draw something from Death Stranding. But anyways, what I ended up doing was I had 90 minutes left of the evening, and I thought, okay, well, let's just do a headshot. Let's start simplifying all this down. The moral of this video is going to be kind of how to recover when you're up against it. A lot of people talk about art block, and did you hear that? I was blocked on the word art block. They say, what do you do when you are suffering from art block? The answer is, I actually kind of never am. And it's not that I'm saying that like I'm like a superhero and I'm never dealing with art block. What I mean is there's always sort of like a way to pivot and do something different when you're doing art for yourself, or if you're doing art professionally, you don't have the option of being blocked. In fact, I don't know of a professional artist who has ever said like, I was art blocked at my job today, because you just don't have that luxury. And when it comes to your personal work, yeah, for sure, there's been artists that have said like, oh yeah, I just sat down that night and I couldn't think of anything to draw, but it's never like one of these prolonged art blocks that a lot of people complain about. It's more like, yeah, I didn't really feel like drawing anything, I wasn't in the zone, and so I did something different, and it's like for that night. Now again, I want to stress, that's not me saying that I or my art friends who are professional artists are superheroes. It's just that we have worked to develop mental tools to try and get around that. It's a lot of problem solving, and it's a lot of kind of just a vast pool of things that could potentially be interesting that we sort of pull from in order to draw. That's the number one way that you get around art block, is you give yourself options and you kind of just push yourself through it and you get something done. Now, that's not a really easy technique. That's not one of those sort of simple things that I can just hand someone and say, this is how you get over art block. But that's unfortunately kind of the truth. There are lots of people who will say, oh, I go for a walk, or I do this, or I do that, whatever it is. That's the part of art that I talk about on this channel, where you have to sort of game your own brain. You have to figure out, it's not an art problem, it's a brain problem. It's like, what am I doing to myself that's keeping me from being able to progress in this drawing? And sometimes it's totally psychological. It's like, oh, I worked myself up too much. Sometimes it's, I don't have a good idea or a good pose. And all of those individual things have solutions. You don't have a good pose? Look up some poses. You don't have a good idea? Start immersing yourself in a bunch of media and things that inspire you. You feel like you're putting too much stress on yourself? Go for a walk, come back in a little bit, do something that maybe lightens your mood, and then come back to the drawing. These are all ways that you solve it. Art block is not a universal problem. It's a term that we use that's like a big ass bucket for all the problems that we might be having when we can't really get a piece to work. And so you have to try and figure out exactly what the real problem is and try to get around that. Now let me quickly jump into what I'm doing here. I'm doing the same methodology that I've been using for a while now, where it's like turpentine brush, blotch a bunch of stuff in with as flats, and then go in with ambient occlusion layers and lighting layers. Some of the choices that I'm making here, though, are deliberately designed to speed things up and get me something that will look nice quickly. And so this is all about scope control, which is also a part of having an artistic block. You might be trying to tackle something that's too big. And again, I want to stress that I don't think this piece came out spectacularly, but the point here is about how I tried to salvage something in the limited amount of time I had. So what is my scope control here? The first thing was I moved away from doing something from Death Stranding that all my ideas were around full body character with all of the packages on his back and a background. Way too much now, especially in the 90 minutes that I had left. So I pull back and I say, cool, just a headshot. What am I going to do for a background? I know, I'll just hint at the Horde character screen. If you haven't seen what that is, it's basically like a red sky, fiery background, some sparks flying in the air. So it'd be really recognizable to somebody who knows what that screen looks like. Then after I've decided on these things, also the red helps play off of a orc's green skin. Once I've got all that down, I get this rough sketch in super fast. It's got just enough information so that I can start painting, and then I start flatting. My flats are simplistic. I have his neck and body flat. You see his ear goes past his neck, so I've got like a break point where I can then have his jaw and face and head and ear all on their own layer. So that's one layer. Body's one layer. Then I've got the mouth, and then I've got the teeth as 2 layers there. Then I've got the eye, the iris, the eyelashes, 3 layers there, and then the eye patches in 2 layers, which is the gold part and then the black string part, which is all just thrown in pretty roughly, to be honest. The whole thing was get it done. It wasn't about make it pretty. Then what did I do for scope? Well, I backlit him. This is a dramatic lighting that is way easier to do than something where the character is lit from somewhere in the front. I did my ambient occlusion pass already in the beginning, so I've got all my form down, and now all I have to do is fill him with the shadow and then start erasing away at where that light's going to hit. Of course, I also have to do some smudging and some things like that to try and get everything to look good, and then I get that cast shadow off his ear. These are all like little wins, which is something that you're kind of looking for when you want something to feel impressive. What can feel impressive? What feels impressive is this light hitting from back. It catches that tooth, and then the ear casts that shadow. These are all like little wins that tells the human brain that's looking at the piece that like I quote unquote did this right and that it looks good. And so that's really what I'm going for here, is I'm just trying to get these little wins that are going to make the image seem spectacular in some way, because I have such limited time. You can make incredible art in 10 seconds or 10 hours. It depends on how you control your scope. That's why like you've got like a Zen master who's doing some Zen painting, and they take like one single brush stroke and they do something that's really interesting and cool, and people get lost in it. And then you've got somebody who renders something for like 3 days or even longer if it's like traditional painting and they're doing some big elaborate oil painting, and both of those things can actually capture the attention equally, and it's really just about what you're going to do with your time. What's another thing people like? Rim lights. The human brain just loves rim lights. Well, since he's in this fiery environment, let's get this bouncy, it's not like a strong rim light, but this bounce light coming up from the fiery below kind of thing. And so what I've done is I've started throwing in quote-unquote tricks, even though they're not tricks, they're just more like tools, I guess you could say, to start making this feel gooder. It's like kind of the best way to say it, right? And then I put some subsurface scattering on that ear since the light's coming from behind him. You love seeing that because it tells your brain this character is made of flesh. And then we've got this dark fade now coming from the left to the right, so that we can really sell that dark side of the whole thing. That's me turning off layers and turning them back on because I was making an adjustment. And now we're putting in that brighter light so that we can really get the light that's coming from behind him to read. Now we do some graphical elements that will also give some more energy to the piece. We've got this fiery background, so let's get a fiery rim light around him. That's going to push him forward. I'm talking fast because this is actually a really fast piece. It goes by really quickly. We've got this rim light that pushes him forward, and now we're putting in some highlights from some bounce that's coming, some like fill light basically that's coming from the top somewhere, and that's blue, and that's going to help us flesh out the rest of his flesh, really. So you can see there that what we've got is a bunch of little tricky stuff, and then of course these little embers that are floating in the air are really quick to do. You just paint them in, duplicate them, blur them, set them to color dodge. And right here, let's stop it here. This is the piece as it was finished that evening at Sketchbomb. He was done in 90 minutes, and so he's fine, and it comes off clear. You can tell what he is, but there are certainly a lot of errors that I wish that I could fix or I could sharpen up. In fact, sometimes when it's this messy, I like it better, and then I get a little too precious with it, and I kind of ruin it to some degree. But let's talk about why this works and what I did quickly here. The main things that sells this piece is the lighting and some of the form and the color choice. We've got this reddish purplish background, and we've got this greenish bluish orc up front. So this is something that resonates really well with us. And then all those lighting things that I mentioned, where we've got the subsurface scattering on the ear, we've got the lighting coming from behind him, we've got the skin variation, we've got the shadow coming from the left that's really rounding out his form, and then we've got these embers floating in the air. All in all, we've now created something that most people will look at and they'll just get hit by the impact of all of these little things that sort of add up and make our human brain go, yeah, I like that a lot. And it was done in a very short amount of time, and it was all engineered for that express purpose. But now I want to spend a little bit of extra time with it. So let's start going in and taking it the rest of the way. So I think I spent another 45 minutes or an hour, something like that, on this. So you can see the first thing I do is I start stripping off all of those effects, and I go back into the ambient occlusion, and I have to punch this up. I think that the contrast was a big issue with the other one, so that we get more definition. And what I mean by the contrast was an issue is that it was a little soft and it didn't give us as much depth. Here I've got a new layer to add to that ambient occlusion layer that's darkening certain spots. What I'm doing here now when I turn off the AO layer is there's structural things that I want to adjust in the actual flats themselves. For instance, those teeth aren't rendered really great, so we're going to eventually have to come back and impact those. Oh, I forgot to mention one other thing that worked really well in selling the piece is the skin tone variation, getting some of the red bleeding through on his nose and his ear, getting the 5 o'clock shadow across his face, and getting the darkening around the eye is another thing that just takes seconds, and it adds so much more interest to the image. So now we're just cleaning up all these little aspects of the face, getting some extra lines in there. Here we're going to clean up the teeth because they don't look great, and we've also cleaned up those shapes, so we need to go back in and adjust the AO pass anyhow because those shapes got changed slightly. So now we've gone to our image that almost works as kind of like a color key. It's certainly more advanced than a color key, but it's almost like we've got our rough painting, and now we're going in and making all of that work better. So now we've turned that shadow back on. We need to blend that better. I want everything to just kind of look nicer and look like I actually spent some more time on it, and so that's what this phase is right here. Some of it is going to be about changing the structure of how I have it in there. For instance, on his face, we're going to adjust that a bit, but on his neck and shoulder, that was really just, or his neck and his trapezius. That is just about smoothing it out. Same thing now, we've moved on to the face here. This is about cleaning and making sure that we're defining that face properly. So you can see here I'm getting a little heavier about that shadow where it curves in underneath his cheekbone, and then I'm making that jowl, the part that's wrapped around his tooth, more pronounced. We're also going to have to address the way that it now works on the tooth, because that tooth has changed shape as well. So when we get to the tooth, we'll adjust those colors. Here, I thought it'd be nice to add some chest hair. It just add more texture. That he's got that big broad chest in the image, and it fills up so much of it on purpose because I wanted him to feel imposing and put him high up in the frame. But I wanted to add just like a little bit more texture to the image, and I thought that that would be really cool. The way that I did it was I just switched to like an ink brush of some sort and just dashed all of those in there by hand, and then duplicated them, blurred them, and set that to a multiply so that I would get the sort of AO around each hair to some degree. I wanted his chin to be more prominent, so we darken underneath his chin to push that forward. And then we're also cleaning up, just making sure that blush is on there right. Is it strong enough? Here we're finally getting to that tooth where we select the tooth, clear away, fill it back in, and start erasing. And now we're doing a fresh version of the subsurface scattering that's kind of hitting because that light is hitting him and then bleeding into the shadow. Here I'm turning on and off that darkening, and I'm trying to decide if it still works or if it needs to be tweaked at all. I also turned the bounce light back on because now that we've started to get all these lower structural elements completed, we can now go back to more of these effects type aspects and say, okay, are these still working? Is there anything that we need to change there? Putting some bounce now underneath his neck, on his trapezius there, on that, I actually don't know what that thing is called, the tendon, the neck tendon, I don't know. And on his teeth. We're kind of going a little overboard with it now, but on purpose. We want to just keep putting those things that are really satisfying to look at into the image. Turn the embers back on, get some glow, give him a nipple, because I feel like he needs those nipples. And then we're adding just a little highlight on his face there to make sure that that attention still hits on that glare that he's delivering the viewer, because I really want to make sure that that reads, since he's all in shadow, and we've got that hot rim light that's capturing a lot of attention over there, and I just wanted to make sure that they were equally competing. Adding a little bit of spots just to give him some more visual interest, and now we've turned on that blue bounce light again, and we'll just kind of dart through it and make sure that it's sound. Adding a little extra bloom on the rim light. You can see me there flipping things on and off so I could see if all of the adjustments were actually worth it or not. And then here at the very end, I darkened underneath his neck a little more. Now here at the very end, we did some color adjustments using color balance, which you can see right here. So this is the final version of the image after spending 90 minutes at SketchBomb and then doing an extra, let's say, hour at home just of polishing it up. It probably didn't take truly an hour, but I was like watching TV or something, and so it probably was only 30 minutes of work that I blew up into an hour. So again, this is the final image. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we had at SketchBomb. This is what it looked like before I spent the extra time, and then back to the final version. So I hope you enjoyed seeing this because it was such a compressed amount of time that it was kind of cool to try and focus on what was going to be the biggest bang for my buck as far as an illustration goes. So, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video or any of the others, please consider hitting like, hitting subscribe, and hitting that bell so that you get notifications, and I'll see you on the next one. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me. Hey everyone. I just wanted to let you know that I am now on a website called Coffee. It's a great website where you can just toss somebody a couple of bucks and they can buy a coffee. You guys have asked in the past how you can support the channel. This is now a way. I thought it was a nice opt-in way where you just toss a few bucks whenever you feel like, and it goes to me, and it's kind of just like a light thing instead of having to pay for a subscription model or anticipate goods down the line. I'll just always be doing these videos, and if you ever feel like throwing some monetary appreciation my way, you can do it via this website. Coffee.com/Zatrancis.